So this is a multi-year long proceeding where we're slowly and meticulously working through the resource planning. And then all of a sudden the governor fires off a letter at the beginning of this month. And before you know it, before the month is even over, Xcel's running out the door issuing RFPs and the PUC saying, yes, we're giving you preliminary approval, start seeking those, and let's build 4,000 megawatts of generation by the end of next year in order to get all the tax credits. And so you have to wonder, in all of that haste to try to gobble up all those subsidies, if they're not, overlooking some of the real binding constraints there are. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And for this week's episode, we're going to go back to sort of our bread and butter, and that's because there's been some new developments with Xcel and the PUC. Shocker. This time, actually, I think it is quite shocking just from some of the top line numbers that are being bandied about. But Xcel is evidently now telling the Public Utilities Commission that in order to meet this projected increase in demand from things like data centers and also electrification and the like, the stuff that we've talked about so frequently on the show, they predict that they will need to spend $22 billion, that's billion with a B, in the next decade and a half or so in order to meet that demand.
Yeah. So, Jake, this is kind of funny. They're getting closer and closer to the number we predicted with the, or you predicted, I should say. You, Isaac, and Mitch predicted with the electrification series that was done in 2023. Because, by the way, too, we're also the only ones who have modeled the 100% by 2040. So the reason why we know what the costs of these things are is because they've been modeled, we've done it. So I've got 4 points to make about this. So just wrap your mind around $22 billion with a B, roughly 2 million ratepayers, right? So do the math. It's ugly. It's ugly. They're saying much of this, Jake, is because of data centers. Data centers are driving this. So you think as a residential or a small business person, well, why would that matter to me? Well, it's going to matter to you because they're going to socialize all those costs. There are a couple of things a couple of points that I want to make about this, actually 4 specifically. And I wanted to say what Xcel's current large loads look like versus what data centers look like. And this is why there's so much concern around them. Your current large loads are things like the Climax mine, which has been there, it's established. They have tangible assets, right? Like the Climax mine can't get up and move to, Kentucky or Iowa. They're here because that's where the resource is. The other one, another large load user is Evraz Steel, which has been bought. It's been bought and sold, and that's down in Pueblo, and they have been very good about keeping that there. Now, that is one that potentially it could get up and move, but you're talking about a significant workforce that would be stranded. You're talking about a lot of just sort of capital assets that are there as well. So those are what the current large loads look like. I mean, they're in Colorado for a reason. It could be the labor force, it could be the resources, whatever it is, they're in Colorado for a reason. This drive for $22 billion, according to Xcel Energy, is because of data centers. Now, we've talked about data centers ad nauseum on this show. And let's when you dive into that, what do they have? Buildings and some assets inside. They don't have a large workforce or anything, but these are things that don't have a gigantic physical footprint in the state. In other words, they can get up and move if they want. There's no guarantee of them staying. So they're saying, Xcel is saying, and this is, by the way, from a story from Colorado Sun. We'll drop that in the show notes. But here's the thing. They're saying data centers, the load could be 8.5 gigawatts just for data centers. Now, to compare that, Xcel has 6.2 gigawatts of generating capacity in Colorado right now. So you're talking about, what is that? Like one and a quarter times. You're doubling it plus 25% roughly. It's nuts. Like that is an enormous amount to put on the grid between now and 2040. So, and that's what Xcel is saying is going to be the $22 billion price tag. Now, we know data centers are also playing utilities and states against each other. Every single state is not going to see their load double. So, and we've talked about that. We know that. Even Utility Dive did a story about it. Now, here's the other point I wanted to make. Xcel had a comment, and I thought this was kind of funny. And it says, Xcel says it's not going to enter into any contracts or get into any agreements that will hurt its existing customers. And okay, I'm going to take them at their word. I'm going to say, okay, they're not going to do that. Except for the fact we were told the same thing with Comanche 3, which was supposed to have a life cycle, of another 50 to 60 years. And here we are talking about shutting it down some 30 years ahead of time. So color me skeptical about Xcel actually knowing what will be good for ratepayers in 2040, or whether or not those data centers will actually even materialize. And that brings us to the last one. Just the whole uncertainty and risk surrounding this. There's no guarantee that these people are going to show up. And if they want to bring these data centers into Colorado, what they really need to do is to reform the regulatory process. I mean, we're looking at proceedings in front of this PUC commission that should have been decided a year ago, and they're still trying to decide. They've had to extend deadlines because this commission cannot make decisions. I don't really trust this commission to make, I would say, decisions that are in the best interest of ratepayers or of Xcel or of the state of Colorado. When you're talking about $22 billion, 8.5 gigawatts, my suggestion is you get these large loads, just these new large loads out from underneath PUC regulation. Let Xcel and whoever the data centers are negotiate independently. Let them do it. Let them do it themselves. Get them. They don't even have to be hooked up to the grid or anything. Let the entity and Xcel figure it out and keep them out of the PUC and off the backs of already captive ratepayers.
Yeah, I definitely want to jump off on that point, because I think this totally laced bare sort of the inherent weaknesses into, I don't know what you'd call the monopoly or the cost of service utility regulation system when you have something like this where it's a bunch of potential new large loads that are trying, it's in their game is to move as quickly as possible and get connected to the grid as soon as possible. However, there's also uncertainty as to whether they're sincere about their interest in Colorado versus another state. To them, it's sort of fungible. They can locate it anywhere. But then you have these slow-moving regulatory proceedings where Xcel just says, we project this much if all of this comes to fruition, so we need you to authorize this much in a lump sum now. And guess what? If only half of what we project materializes, too bad, so sad. You already authorized all that money, and someone's going to have to cover that cost, because that's the way cost of service regulation works, and that means you and I, the ratepayer. So it totally, I think this issue, more than most, I think, exposes the inherent weaknesses of the current system, which raises the question, like you brought up, why not open up the door for a little bit of experimentation, let these well-capitalized tech companies get into arrangements with Xcel or some other provider to handle this on their own with their own private capital, where ratepayers, especially residential and commercial ones who aren't even directly benefiting from this service, aren't potentially getting hung out to dry with $22 billion in expense. I don't think we can overstate that enough, how large that is compared to Xcel's traditional spending that we've seen in the last few years. I remember when they did their first round of the clean heat plan, or the clean energy plan rather, and they were talking about $12 billion of new renewables. That was eye-popping. Now we're almost talking double that in needed new spending in a very short amount of time. So this is rapidly, I think, spiraling out of control, and it's all because of sort of this weird monopoly regulatory paradigm, a slow-moving PUC, and a bunch of uncertainty around sort of a Wild West gold rush in terms of getting data centers built.
And something else, remember, I've had this anecdote about, I was at an energy forum and I talked to a developer who said, no, there's there's not any interest, or there's not a lot of interest in Colorado. Well, here's what somebody was quoted, and it's a guy named John Dinsdale, who's an analyst with Synergy Energy Group or Synergy Research Group. This is what he said. Sort of echoes what I had been saying anecdotally. Colorado really hasn't been a major target for hyperscale operators, and there is little activity in terms of developing large data centers or campuses, Dinsdale said in an email. Looking at our known future pipeline of data being developed, that is unlikely to change much anytime soon. They aren't coming to Colorado. I don't care what Xcel's got $22 billion in the pipeline. How great for them to be able to put that on the backs of captive ratepayers. But Jake, I just don't see data centers coming here unless we get them out from underneath that regulatory process.
Yeah, that's a great point. I noticed that the Sun mentions, when it mentions like the large example of a data center that's coming here, it's this QTS Reality Trust project that's supposed to be built in Aurora. And it says that this is Colorado's example of a hyperscale project, but it's just a 177 megawatt data center, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a lot of power for a single user. But when you look at other states that are seeing gigawatt plus 2 gigawatt sprawling campuses, you really just aren't seeing that same level of interest here in Colorado. And I think you're exactly right. You sort of predicted this, and you've talked to folks that have said as much, that Colorado just really isn't up there in terms of interest for these would-be data center providers. But we'll, of course, stay on top of this. We hope that the PUC offers some sort of protection for ratepayers in this proceeding and doesn't let Xcel get put its cart before the horse and just start throwing around massive amounts of new capital spending that we get to finance and make sure their shareholders get a healthy profit, regardless of whether the data centers come or not. But on a related story that we also wanted to touch on in this episode, what Xcel is also hurrying for with the PUC, and actually this time with PUC help. They are trying to very, very quickly rush out and gobble up as many of the remaining so-called Inflation Reduction Act subsidies as they can before the phase-out truly begins in earnest. Another story in the Colorado Sun. Why don't you tell us about that, Amy?
Yeah, and actually, this is there was a decision that was rendered by the Public Utilities Commission, which, by the way, when the governor lights a fire under them, they are willing to act.
Yeah, isn't that pretty incredible?
Yeah. Yep. And a decision was made. I want in just a matter of days, and what they're looking for, or what they're allowing Xcel Energy to do, is to get bids for 4,000 megawatts, and it's nameplate capacity, megawatts of renewables, so that they can get it in before the subsidies expire, right? Or before the subsidies are supposed to be phased out. And that means they actually have to be doing active construction. So it's not just getting the bids. They will have to get the bids and begin construction pretty quick, like within a few months. And this decision it looks like it's going to be coming out in probably from the PUC there will be a decision made, and then Xcel can get bids. And I'm going to say they get bids like by October and December is when the decision will be made on which bids to accept. So it's 4,000 megawatts of of renewables, and then and hybrid, which apparently means renewable plus storage.
Mhm.
And then I think it's 200 megawatts of thermal, and then another 300 megawatts of whatever Excel thinks, firm dispatchable, which means thermal. And I love the fact that they say storage. Storage is neither firm nor dispatchable, but I'm not the PUC, so I don't get to make those rules. But the interesting thing about this is how quickly they were able to make that decision based on the governor's letter, which I think was dated like August 1st or something. But the point being, when there's a fire lit under them by the governor, they are able to respond quickly. And the important thing about this, Jake, and to everybody out there, this is going to be expensive because I don't know where they're going to hook them up. How are they going to hook them up to the grid? Where are the transmission lines going to be built? We're in the middle of lawsuits about the transmission lines. And my question will be, will they go ahead and start building them? Ratepayers are stuck paying for them, yet there are lawsuits about transmission lines. And so we end up with stranded assets.
Yeah, no, it's a raises a great point, especially about the expedited portion. This is, for folks that don't know, this is part of a proceeding that's been going on since 2021. So this is a multi-year long proceeding where we're slowly and meticulously working through the resource planning, and then all of a sudden the governor fires off a letter at the beginning of this month, and before you know it, before the month is even over, Excel's running out the door issuing RFPs, and the PUC saying, yes, we're giving you preliminary approval, start seeking those, and let's build 4,000 megawatts of generation by the end of next year in order to get all the tax credits. And so you have to wonder, in all of that haste to try to gobble up all those subsidies, if they're not, overlooking some of the real binding constraints there are, not just the ratepayer risk, but like you said, transmission congestion. Where are they going to, siting these projects in the various communities that they're inevitably going to have to be located in? We've seen that become an issue, not just in Colorado, but nationwide, where a developer thinks, oh, this is great, I'll plop my wind farm here, and the community says, I don't think you will, and it's tied up in a fight. So it remains to be seen. There's a lot of remaining questions, but it just goes to show when subsidies are leading the way on policy and not actual planning or need, that sometimes some of this hasty stuff can be pushed forward without much thought.
Yeah, and you think about 4,000 megawatts. So we just said in a few minutes ago that Excel's total generating capacity in Colorado is 6.2. So they're putting 4,000 megawatts of renewables on the system. You think, oh my gosh, we're doubling almost, well, not quite doubling, so you're at 80%. You're increasing capacity by 85%, except for the fact that you're not. What you're doing is you might be building that much, but you got to look at the capacity factor of renewables. Solar on a good day is 20 to 25%. It's far less in the winter. And then wind, top is 30 to 40%. I laugh. I go, you could just build one, 1,000 megawatt nuclear reactor and put it where Comanche 3, where Comanche is, and you're done. Just build one nuclear reactor, just one. Do that. You've got transmission lines. You've got a workforce down there that knows how to run a power plant. The chasing of subsidies is that lucrative to the utility, number one, and number two is it's that important to the governor that we get this done, that he get this done, that it be part of his legacy, that you're going to be bidding against how many other states that are doing, California will be doing the same thing. Other blue states will be doing it. Demand will be high, supply will be low. We will be paying top dollar for it.
Yeah, and you raise a great point about the rush to capture the subsidies. So you're ignoring a lot of dispatchable options in this. I don't know if you recall, but we did an episode earlier in this year because Xcel sent a letter to the Public Utilities Commission, actually raising some red flags about, hey folks, I don't think we're considering gas enough here. We're seeing looming resource adequacy risks. Well, fast forward a couple months and suddenly those are an afterthought because we got to gobble up the subsidies, keep building the intermittents. It's fine. It's fine. We'll deal with that later. And so it's just amazing what a little bit of change in fiscal policy means for something as serious as looming resource adequacy problems for a utility like Xcel, whose
Right?
number one job is keep the freaking lights on. And
No, that's 100%, that's 100% correct. And the other thing to watch on this will be, what do other utilities do?
yeah.
Are they going to do the exact same thing? Are they going to go like, will Black Hills go ask for the same thing, chase a bunch of subsidies, rush it through so that they can start getting stuff in the ground? Will Tri-State do that? I mean, I'll be curious to see what other utilities do.
Yeah, that's actually a great point to see what if the smaller players try to do the same, because that just adds to the situation you mentioned where there's a ton of competition to try to get these projects in the ground so everyone can get their tax subsidies, which will inevitably probably make those bids more expensive in the end. But as we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any takeaways for our listeners from either of these stories?
Yeah, we're in a new era. Um, there are as they rush for to harvest subsidies, I think you're going to see higher prices, but we'll see. I mean, those bids will be coming out, but we'll see. I think you're going to see higher prices because Xcel is now competing against every other utility in the country that wants to do the same thing, especially if they're building in a blue state that has absurd, insane mandates like Colorado does. So we're in a new era. Two, Colorado uh, is going to have to own all of this bad policy, and built into much of this is uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty. We don't know what load growth is going to be. We don't know what cost is going to be. We don't know if data centers are going to come here. We just don't know. What we do know is the trajectory looks bad. That's about the only certainty we have, but we are uncertain about what the growth is going to be. Xcel has not been great at forecasting. I'm not trying to knock them, but they just haven't been great. And we don't know what 2040 is going to look like any more than in 2010 we knew what 2020 would look like. It's not any clearer now. So one is we're in a new era. Two, we're in an era of uncertainty and we're going to have to own it. And then three, I'm going to say, as I always, firm your own grid, not just because of reliability, but as a hedge against cost.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be cheaper for you to get batteries and a gas generator so you can pull yourself off the grid at times of peak use when the rates are really high.
It's a great point. Firm your own grid, folks. But that does it for us on another episode here of PowerGab. If you like what you saw, you can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests you'd like to see us interview here on the show, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.